From each happily ever after, every wish upon a star. Let's break down the movies that shaped who we are. From memory lane to now and everything in between. The most famous of films to the ones we've never seen. Decade by decade, all the times we laughed and cried. And with a little pixie dust, they will all take flight. Reliving the feelings, and we're trying our very best. And if they mean the same to you, please be our guest. So hop aboard, we would love to have you as we hang with a certain mouth, the whole gang too. If you love nostalgia stuff, we hope this does the trick. Thanks for joining us as we deep dive the magic.
Hi, and welcome back to the Deep Diving the Magic podcast. I'm KJ.
And I'm Jeffrey. And can you believe it? We've made it to 25 films. Did you think when we started this all those weeks ago that we would be actually getting all the way to 25?
Yes.
I mean, there's only 700 more to go or whatever.
To date.
To date. Well, a little less than 700 more to go up to date. But we've made it to film 25. We're halfway to 50. We're halfway to another milestone. So
Yep.
before we get started, since it is a milestone episode, would you like to read your list upon a star up through 24 films?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I've got Dumbo, The Three Caballeros, Peter Pan, Alice in Wonderland, Fantasia, Saludos Amigos, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, Bambi, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and Cinderella.
And I have through 24 films. I have Peter Pan, Alice in Wonderland, Pinocchio, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, The Three Caballeros, Cinderella, Dumbo, Bambi, and Fun and Fancy Free.
Yep.
Will film 25 make a spot on either of these lists?
We'll have to
So
see.
speaking of film 25, the 25th of the Disney feature-length films is from December 23rd, 1954,
Mhm.
and that is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Mhm.
I don't think I ever saw this before.
I know for 100% that I had never seen this before.
So I'm not gonna let anything. I'm not gonna give anything away. That I'm just gonna say that I don't think I've ever seen it before. But we'll leave it at that until we dive in. But
Yeah, I definitely hadn't
do
seen
you
it
have
before either.
any synopsis or early thoughts or even some tidbits to get us started before we dive in?
Yeah, so it is a ship sent to investigate a wave of mysterious sinkings
Mhm.
encounters the advanced submarine, the Nautilus, commanded by Captain Nemo.
You got Nemo there. Oh, you got Dory. I guess you got some Nemo on your cup, but it's in the
His
story.
story.
So any background or anything before we dive in?
This film actually won 2 Oscars.
You know what? It deserves it. But we'll
I'm
keep
glad
going.
you think so.
It was one of the first films that to be filmed in cinemas.
Okay, yep.
It's live action, obviously.
Mhm.
If you can't tell by the cover here. And there used to be a ride at Disney World where you rode the Nautilus. It's gone now. It's making room for the Little Mermaid ride, which is a fantastic ride. I like to hold my breath when we go underwater, but we'll cover that.
Interesting tidbit on something that we learned about that. They actually took water from that ride and put it into the Little Mermaid ride. So that way it's still part of it there.
It's true. And also on top of that, there's like a cutout of the Nautilus in the Winnie the Pooh's treehouse.
Oh, I don't think I've noticed it. I'll have
Yeah,
to
so
watch.
so when you're getting on the Winnie the Pooh ride, which is one of my top favorite rides, it has the worst queue. I can go on about that. That's a story for a different day.
Mhm.
But in between the getting on the ride and the meet and greet, there's like that little like treehouse that all the kids play in.
Mhm.
There's a Nautilus in there because that's part of the land, like a cutout like
Okay.
into the tree.
Interesting. I'll have to look for it. Is
Is
it inside the tree or on the outside
inside
of
the tree.
It's inside the
Yeah.
tree. Okay. That's probably why I've never seen it.
So you ready to dive in?
All right. So yeah, let's do
All
it.
right. So it starts with the curtains opening, and then there's a book opening that goes to the pages that shows
Yes.
chapter 1.
if you have been to Disney World, I felt like I was sitting on the Carousel of Progress.
Yeah, because the
with the curtains.
because the curtains
It
open.
almost looked identical, different color, but
Mhm.
very identical to how that opened up. So that felt familiar.
Well, that ride deserves an Oscar too. So the first scene that is we see a submarine. Well, we don't know it's submarine yet, but we see a submarine. Spoilers. We see a submarine heading towards a ship to ram into it and blow it up. And
Some wowing effects.
yeah, if you watched our last episode, you know how I feel about rams ramming into things, but that's a whole other story. But
Not
so
again.
this the ship rams into and blows up another ship. And then it cuts to a scene.
But people didn't know that it was a submarine. Like
Correct.
they thought it was a sea monster.
Yeah.
So all around land, it's going around that it's a sea monster. And they're trying to like hire some people to like go take out the sea monster, so that way it's
Well,
basically
even
being called the ship killer.
even before they try to hire some people to take it out,
Mhm.
they're it cuts to a scene where they're just trying to recruit men to work on the ships. They're offering them double pay.
Mhm.
Um, there are like there's just no crews for these ships.
Mhm.
Because all the crews are afraid of the sea monster that is destroying ships.
Yeah.
So everybody thinks it's a sea monster.
And there were sailors that were making it back and describing like a vicious narwhal.
Hmm. I mean, it kind of looks
Can
like it.
have you seen a narwhal?
It has like the point in the front,
Like a huge horn.
which I guess
I didn't think it looked anything like a narwhal, and
um
it just looked very weird because it had like a green light.
well, we'll get there. It's a monster right now.
Okay.
So another ship is canceled because there's no crew.
Mhm.
Again, they are afraid of what they believe is the sea monster.
Mhm.
So then we see so then again they're trying to recruit seamen to go on the to work on the boats, but we see this guy
Mhm.
who will be a prevalent character later, but we see this guy who is kind of, you can just tell he's a troublemaker from the beginning. He is flanked with these two ladies who are dressed like the girl from the Sleepy Hollow movie, cleavage and all, like they had the cleavage and everything, like it was, they weren't hiding that. So we also find out that they are located in San Francisco, and they're all wearing jackets, which I can relate to because a couple weeks ago in the summer I went to San Francisco and it was far too cold for it being the middle of summer. But so they're trying to recruit these men. Everyone's trying to, they're acting tough or they're not acting tough, but everyone's afraid of the sea monster.
Mhm.
So then we meet a professor, who is trying to set sail to the Orient, but he's unable to because there's no cruise.
Mhm.
Um,
He's a naturalist professor.
okay.
So he's like studying like nature and how to preserve things, and
Did you write his name down?
it is Professor Pierre Arnox?
Okay.
Arnonox?
So
I
he,
probably just butchered that, sorry. He's
so I
supposed to
will,
be French.
so I will say this: there's a professor, and he has an assistant, and
So,
I have pages and pages of notes, and I never wrote down either of their names, so I will be referring to them as the professor and the assistant from here on out.
well, I mean, I think that's fine because I can't really say their names either.
So
But funny tidbit, some of the goofs for this film, um, so the professor is supposed to be French and his accent is wrong.
yeah,
It's not a French accent.
so I didn't know that.
There
So
you
then
go.
the U.S. government shows up to offer the professor a different way to get to where he's looking for,
Yep.
and that would be on a warship, and they would be on constant lookout for the sea monster on their voyage.
Yep.
Um, so along with the crew on the warship, there is the professor, whose name I did not write down.
Well,
Go ahead.
going back to where like the people like would talk about the sea monster and the sailors, and they were talking about it before the professor came into the scene. There was one guy on it. It was around the time the professor got introduced, and he got into a fight and got pushed into the mud. And I don't know if you noticed it, but after he touched everybody, like he would get pushed into other people, and this dude was like covered in mud. There was no mud on anybody else. Like everybody else was clean. I don't know if you noticed that, but it really bothered
There's
me.
a lot of water around somewhere, you know, and
They were on land.
it's so cold in San Francisco that it might have just froze off.
Yeah, whatever.
So we get on this warship,
Yes.
and there is the professor, whose name I never wrote down, his assistant, whose name I never wrote down, and then that fun-loving but trouble-causing crewman that I was talking about earlier that had the ladies, whose name is Ned.
Yes, Ned Land.
Ned
Isn't
Land.
it ironic? His last name is Land, and he's a
Yeah.
sailor.
So, those are going to be some
He's
of
a
the,
professional whaler and harpooner.
yes.
Just FYI.
And so Ned, the professor, and the assistant join this military
Mhm.
vessel to get on.
Mhm.
Right away we have a Disney storm. There's a Disney storm at sea, which they get through.
Mhm.
And then Ned sings the song "Whale of a Tale," which is a famous song. In the Disney world, it was also very nostalgic because when I was a kid, it was on the sing-along tapes.
Mhm.
But I don't remember it being like films, like scenes from this. But I remember I was singing along to the song when
You
I
were
heard it.
singing along to it. I'd never heard it, I don't think, before. Or if I did, I didn't remember it, so I obviously was not singing along.
One of the famous lines of it is that he swears by his tattoo.
Yes,
I
I do
was
remember
I was
that
gonna ask you, which tattoo of yours would you swear by?
one. My giant squid.
Spoilers. Um,
It's my spirit animal.
so anything about that before we move on to what they see?
So when they're in the cabin, I don't know if you noticed it, but in the background there was a painting of Abraham Lincoln, which supposedly is Walt Disney's favorite president.
Yeah, I mean, there's the moments with Mr. Lincoln and Disneyland and everything, so
Mhm.
that would make total sense.
And
And it's a period piece. So.
something that kept bothering me, it took me a minute to figure it out, but something that kept bothering me when I was watching it was the assistant's voice. I meant to look it up, but I didn't. Um, he sounded like Igor from Dr. Frankenstein.
I mean, he was an assistant too.
Yeah, but he sounded just like
Yeah.
this. Like, I think it might have been the same guy, and I should have looked it up. I was going to, but I didn't. But
Go ahead and look it up now while I.
he was spot on voice wise. Like, so if you haven't seen it, imagine Igor's voice from Dr. Frankenstein, and that's what the assistant sounded like in this movie. And I'll look it up for you.
So while she's doing that, they come across a ship that they witness exploding, and they all believe that it's another monster, that it's the monster, except for Ned. Ned has his doubts. They see the monster then, which they then see is the submarine from the first scene of the film, but they don't all know that yet. But they begin shooting cannons at this sea monster. But then the monster notices them and begins to charge them and destroys their ship. So then they all kind of jump aboard or jump overboard for their safety. The professor jumps, and then he is with his assistant, and the assistant float. The professor and the assistant float to safety, but they end up floating over to a parked monster, quote unquote, which they discover is the submarine. And I don't want to get too far ahead while you're looking that up, but so
This guy was in a ton of movies. I just want to say that.
was he?
And I'm not seeing it so far, but there was like a bunch of like horror films. So
Maybe.
anyway,
I mean, time wouldn't make sense because the
Um,
original
yeah.
Patrick Preston was in black and white. So
he could have been in it when he was younger.
so they float.
Same voice though,
They
same voice.
they float over to the parked monster, which they discover is the submarine. The two of them climb aboard to see if anyone is there. They do go inside and they find that it's filled with
Who was just gonna walk in a ship?
I mean, Snow White just walked into a dwarf's house.
And that was a bad thing. Grumpy didn't like her.
So the professor and the assistant just invite themselves in, but they see that it's filled with magnificent craftsmanship.
Yeah.
So then Ned also finds them and he climbs aboard. Because
Ned.
hey, he swears by his tattoo.
Mr. Land.
Um, and then Ned and the assistant are adamant about getting off the monster, but the professor is mesmerized by it, and he wants and all of its wonder,
Just
and he
keeps
wants to
going
keep
deeper
he
and
wants to keep
deeper into
exploring.
this sub.
We see a glorious grand piano,
Mhm.
which is going to play a part in the movie going forward.
Mhm.
Did you know that that grand piano is actually the piano used in the Disneyland Haunted Mansion? Like
No, but I could
like
definitely.
they repurposed
It
it.
did look familiar,
Yeah,
so
they
that
repurposed it. It's in the Disneyland one.
okay,
But yeah, it's the in the original Haunted Mansion.
okay. Because I was thinking, well, I don't know, some of the music in it when he was playing it reminded me of like Phantom of the Opera.
Well, yeah, you can see that.
Very creepy little organ.
Imagine if he just, in the period time he's on the ship and he just bust out like Piano Man by Billy Joel. All right, that's why it's Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah.
So the assistant finds the professor, who is in front of a large submarine window, watching people who we can assume are the crew from the monster, and they're like collecting stuff in the sea. They're under the sea and they're collecting things from sunken ships, possibly burying the victims. I
I
can't
think
really
they were
tell.
actually burying people because I
Yeah.
think it was like a burial ceremony. And one of the things that stuck out to me that I thought was funny was the professor leaned over and told the person standing beside him that I see the tall one over there. I think that's their leader. Why does the tall one have to be the leader? But I thought that was funny.
Yeah, that's
This movie was not one of my favorites, but they did have some funny points.
so the crew of the monster,
Yep.
they do spot the professor and the assistant, and they all try to escape on Ned's rescue boat, but the scuba people attack their boat and they stop them.
Yeah.
And then much to their unwillingness, they are forced back on the submarine by the many men. They are brought to the leader, whether it's the tall guy or not the
Mhm.
tallest. They are
Did you also notice like how the crew of that sub didn't wear regular shoes? They had like sandals on.
no, I did not notice that.
They wore like sandals.
Really.
Yes.
Um,
I thought that was interesting footwear to be working out on the water.
I mean,
Like old school Chacos.
I guess I remember that. Yeah, I mean, it works.
And it wasn't all of them though, but most of them did have like a weird looking sandal on. Anyway,
When they were in the water.
no, when they were actually like working on the ship.
Keeping their future.
Yeah.
So they're brought to the leader, and then they tell the leader that they thought it was a monster, not a man-made ship
Yep.
that has been causing all the destruction. We also discover that the leader, who we don't know his name yet, is a follower and a fan of the professor's work in his books. Um, which adds a wrinkle into the story that the professor, I'm sorry, that the leader is a fan of and a follower of the professor.
Mm-hmm.
The professor is adamant about not staying. The leader kind of gets upset and he forces the professor, the assistant, and Ned on top of the ship, and then begins to submerge the ship. And we're like, oh no, what's going to happen? But then the captain calls it off and orders to bring the men to quarters because he found out what he wanted to see, and that was to see what the professor's loyalty really was.
Mm-hmm.
And we find out that he was loyal. Are you loyal enough to stand on top of a submarine that's being submerged?
I mean, what's your choice?
That's true. That's true. And then we meet who I would highly assume is KJ's favorite character in this film, and that is the sea lion that appears to be the pet of the submarine. Would you like to tell everyone about the sea lion?
This sea lion just randomly pops in to the.
It's like the dog.
Yeah.
It's like the family pet of the
It's,
submarine.
it's like the Fae of
Yeah, it's like the family pet.
of their ship, and it just randomly keeps making appearances throughout the film. It's quite humorous, actually. I don't remember her name. It is a
Yeah,
girl, though.
yeah, comic relief for sure. I didn't
Yeah.
write down her name either.
I don't remember her name. But
Um,
she was not my favorite person. She was my second favorite person of the film. We'll get to my favorite person soon.
so I don't actually know who your favorite person is going to be, but oh, I guess that makes sense. But so then we learned that the captain's name, as stated earlier, is Nemo, and the submarine's name, as stated earlier, is the Nautilus.
Yep.
So Captain Nemo is the captain of the Nautilus.
Mm-hmm.
So he brings the captured men down to the quarters, and they eat a meal and smoke cigars, all made of things found in the sea.
Yeah, so they don't know that at first. So they're all eating, and then
Gourmet
Mr.
meal.
Land,
Ned.
Ned, is eating with a knife. I thought that was so
I mean,
funny.
he knows his surroundings.
Yeah.
So yeah, everything is made from the sea. They kind of get grossed out by it, but
Yeah, so like, I don't remember exactly what all the things were, but the way he was describing it sounded utterly disgusting. And then the cigars were made out of like some kind of seaweed.
yeah,
And later the sea lion eats them.
it's that sea lion. Um, so then the crew takes Ned and the assistant on a diving expedition with them to a sunken ship. The professor wants to join them, so
Mhm,
then Nemo personally takes him to see the ship.
mhm.
Um, the scenes underwater are beautiful.
Yeah.
It's wild that it was filmed in 1954. I forgot who says it, but they call it a mystic garden of the deep.
Mhm,
And then they steal these poor turtles. They like accost these turtles and
mhm,
bring them with them. But then Ned and the assistant decide to go off on their own to explore a different sunken ship, and they find a treasure chest.
yeah.
Um,
Ned stealing treasure.
yep. It was like a whole treasure chest. Um, I wonder if that's the treasure from the movie we watched
Yeah.
earlier.
So they were actually like in an area of New Guinea, and the water was like super pretty and
Yeah,
clear and like crisp blue.
yeah, it was beautiful.
It was definitely beautiful.
Um, so but the treasure chest is too heavy to transport. They get spotted by sharks. Nemo finds them and he shoots the shark with a harpoon to save them. And then we see like the red shark blood on the blue gray of the underwater, which was a good cinematic touch.
Mm-hmm.
Professor tells Ned to stop, and the professor tells Ned to stop antagonizing Captain Nemo, and they must all stay together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so then we're back on the Nautilus, and Nemo plays that beautiful organ, and then Ned builds a guitar out of a turtle shell. So that'll come into play later. But then we see that the assistant finds Ned in Nemo's treasure closet, stealing some treasures.
That he hides in the turtle shell
He does, and then
guitar.
the trusty sea lion pet tries to blow his cover. Um, what's that? The sea lion. Um, so then we get, you know,
Bothers me. I want to know what her name
yeah, look
was.
it up. So then, um, the Captain Nemo asks the professor to go ashore with him, and and when they're ashore, they watch a prison camp loading ammunition for war onto ships. Which is showing why Nemo prefers the sea than the men on land, because he and his men were once prisoners to the trade as well, and they escaped and built the Nautilus.
Mhm.
They So that shows why he hates war and why he hates men on land, because he was once stuck in the war trade himself. He was a slave to the war trade. Um,
Her
Good.
name was Esmeralda,
Esmeralda.
and I think he calls her Ezzy.
Yeah.
I think he calls her Ezzy, but yeah.
Anything to add with the war prisoner scene when we keep going?
Um, it, I think did you talk about how it was like a mining area?
Yeah.
Um, no, not really. It was just like it kind of reminded me, I guess, of certain scenes from Pandora.
Not there yet.
I mean, obviously we're
Avatar.
not there yet, but
Yeah.
like the mining practices in Pandora.
Yeah, Avatar.
If you've seen that one now, you can reference.
So they go back onto the Nautilus, and Captain Nemo starts to very aggressively play that piano, that
Mhm.
organ, and then the
It
Nautilus.
very much did sound like
Phantom of the Opera.
Phantom of the Opera. Yeah.
And then the Nautilus rams the warship, sinking it and its men, just
Mhm.
like the monster did into the ships earlier in the film. And Nemo believes that this is saving all of the men from war. And we find out that the reason he's doing this is because the men tortured his wife and his son trying to locate Nemo and all of the Nautilus's secrets. So he does take the ship down, but he thinks that it's actually saving them as opposed to killing them.
Yeah.
And then we find out that again, people are trying to find out where the Nautilus's secrets are.
Yeah.
So then Ned and the assistant start to discuss that the captain is winning over the professor, and the professor is kind of turning into the captain, and they discuss a plan to escape.
An alliance. They're forming an alliance.
Yeah. So they break into Nemo's quarters, and the sea lion, Esmeralda, once again tries to blow their spot, but the assistant and Ned are able to discover the location of Nemo's secret land, which they call the Volcania, and escape just in time before Nemo enters. Ned writes the coordinates to Volcania and puts them into bottles to send them overboard in hopes to get rescued. He like empties ancient artifacts.
It was
Like things
like species of things that
they were
some
like
had
preserved in alcohol.
Yeah, they were preserved in alcohol instead of like formaldehyde, but they were like I don't know, like specific fish and probably like little baby sharks or something like inside these bottles, and
And
he
he
just
was
empties
so
them
he
out.
empties
But then he drinks it.
Yeah, he drinks the
After-
alcohol.
After something dead's been floating in it, he drinks it. So he's like a special man.
I think there is an alcohol that people drink that has like dead things in it, but I'm pretty sure. But whatever. So he puts their coordinates in it, and he sends it overboard to try to be rescued at this point. But then the Nautilus does become stuck on a reef off the coast of New Guinea. Um, so the assistant and Ned convince Nemo to allow them to go aboard to try to collect some specimen, but really, and then Nemo instructs them to stay on the beach.
Yeah.
While the crew and Nemo kind of figure out how to fix the the stuck on the reef ship. But of course, Ned immediately leaves the beach into the jungle to try to find a way to escape.
But the captain warned him to stay on the beach because of the cannibals that lived on the island.
Correct.
And Ned is convinced that Nemo has made this up and there's no cannibals on the island. And he tells the assistant, he's like, I'm gonna go get us help. And then he like runs off.
So then he immediately runs back because he does discover
there are cannibals
that there's
on the island.
human skulls on sticks, and there's cannibals. And he runs for his life back to the beach, and he and the assistant are chased by dozens of cannibals who are like shooting arrows at them and at their escape boat. And then they also pursue them on their own boats.
Yeah.
They do make it back to the Nautilus, but Nemo tells them that since they invaded their privacy, the cannibals have every right to invade theirs. Imagine that. Imagine being told that. But then Nemo does turns a lever and shocks the cannibals, and they retreat and flee.
Yeah, because apparently they had like some kind of electric
Force
system.
field-esque
Yeah,
thing,
on the outside of the ship. So if you're standing on the outside of the ship, you will get shocked. He says it's just a light shock, but
it scared the cannibals enough to run.
it was kind of funny because they looked like they were like dancing.
Yeah.
On the ship as they finally jumped out into the water. But I was sitting there thinking, wouldn't you get electrocuted also in the water?
True. But
anyway.
So then Nemo does imprison Ned for constantly disobeying his orders.
Yeah.
But then the Nautilus crew discover another warship and they want to ram it, but in their attempt to dislodge from the reef, they cause themselves to sink, and letting water into the submarine while losing power. So Ned is trapped in the prison that's filling up with lots of water, which reminds me of the Titanic. I know we touched on that last week as well.
Yeah.
Um, so
It had some similar scenes to the Titanic because it like
Mhm.
showed them like shutting specific waterproof doors to kind of like stop any extra water from getting in.
yeah.
So that was kind of cool.
Um, so Ned is trapped in the prison, but they are able to start the engines running again. But we found out that they are now deeper than man has ever been before, which is where I assume they get the title 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Probably.
They never like reference that, but that's what I would assume because they do say that they're deeper than that man has ever been before.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think this is a perfect segue to the actual favorite character of KJ, but we do soon see that they do encounter a terrifying giant squid
Giant squid.
who attacks the Nautilus, and the shocking of it doesn't work.
Yeah,
And
it actually short circuits.
go ahead. What do
They
you
start smoking.
what do you got about our squid friend here?
It's the most interesting squid I've ever seen.
You can kind of see it right here on the cover, but
Oh,
But yeah,
sorry, we
so-
have to remove the other squid.
uh-huh.
Yeah, so giant squid are pretty cool. I don't know if you really know a lot about giant squid, but they're very solitary creatures and they live in
20,000 Leagues Under the Sea,
they
clear.
live in the depths of the sea that we don't really know a lot about them. So I guess it does make sense for them to have been attacked by a giant squid. So the giant squid, I'm assuming, is thinking that the Nautilus is its new dinner.
So it's a monster eating a monster.
Yeah.
Um,
A
so
kraken.
so they decide that they're going to attempt to surface the ship to try to save themselves from the squid.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it is a stressful part of the movie, so it is a doozy of a Disney storm,
Yeah.
Um, and in doing so, the squid tentacles do get into the ship,
Yep.
inside of the ship. So then Nemo goes on top of the ship with a few men to see how
Mm-hmm.
how they can flee the real life sea monster,
Mm-hmm.
and they try to attack it with a harpoon.
Yes.
In doing so, Captain Nemo is grabbed by one of the tentacles, and all of his men are unable to save him, no matter how hard they fight.
Yep.
But meanwhile, our friend Ned,
As he's getting pulled in, so Captain Nemo is getting pulled in, and then you can see like the squid's scary beak. I don't know if you
Yeah.
realize that squids have beaks like a parrot. But you don't want to get snapped by that. And he was getting pulled towards it.
Yep.
And then Ned.
Yep. So Ned is able to perfect timing. Disney timing. Ned is able to break the window from his cell and escape his own certain doom. He comes aboard and discovers that the whole crew is getting destroyed by this squid, and he miraculously hits it between the eyes with a harpoon, because you said he was a professional harpooner earlier.
I mean, if anybody's gonna save you, or you're gonna put your money on somebody that you want to save you, that's the person I would want to save me.
So he miraculously hits it between the eyes, which is the thing that saves it, causing because clearly he has better aim than Robin Hood, I wrote. This saves everyone, and then he jumps overboard to cut Nemo free from the tentacles to save him.
Yeah.
Anything about that scene before I say what happens next?
Yeah, there's not really a lot else.
Yeah, no. So
you just said.
so you think that
I mean, it's kind
Nemo
of a surprise, like the way
yeah,
that
that
Nemo has
saved
treated
him.
him, that
Yep.
he actually jumps in, and Nemo does reference them after
later on, because
You
the
know.
next scene, you think that Ned and Nemo are gonna like bury the hatchet,
Mhm.
but it doesn't happen, and then Ned just goes immediately to his quarters and gets drunk with the sea lion,
Does he?
singing songs and getting drunk with the sea lion.
Mhm.
And then because of the act of kindness and the selflessness, Nemo does debate forgiving the above water world as the Nautilus, and then the Nautilus is nearing the Vulcania.
Mhm.
But as the Nautilus comes up, we do then discover that the secret base of Vulcania is surrounded by warships because they're being ambushed.
Probably because they found all those floating
Well,
messages in a bottle.
spoilers.
You've
I'll
already
I'll get there. I'll get
message in a
there.
bottle.
They decide that they're going to dive under the ships to make it to the island and enter through a secret underwater cave because everywhere needs a secret water cave. If 90s cartoons taught me anything. And Nemo and a few of his men take a raft out to their base, where they're getting shot at by military. And it is revealed that the reason the military is there because they saw Ned's bottles with the coordinates, which upsets everybody.
Head.
So then Nemo decides that he's gonna detonate a bomb to destroy all of his discoveries before his hated military finds them.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts on that extreme right there? No.
No.
So they detonate the timer and then they're going back to the Nautilus and then once they are trying to get back into the ship, Nemo is shot by military fire before entering the ship, but he still does still continue to give orders after being shot. He announces to his men that he is taking the Nautilus for a dive for the final time
It's gonna go down with the ship.
and that he is
Like their
dying.
captain.
Yep. Well, I'll get there on this, but that he is dying and that the Nautilus is dying with him, and the explosion will soon destroy the island and the ship. The crew decides to support this and go to the quarters to go down with the captain, but the Ned, professor, and the assistant beg the Nemo to consider. All I can think of, quite contrary to what you just said, is normally the captain goes down with the ship, but Nemo is making the ship go down with the captain.
Well, I'm pretty sure that the ship was also still damaged, so I think it was going down too.
I mean, it was a sea monster, so
It wasn't really a sea monster though.
so he's taken the whole ship with him. So Ned does escape his cabin by hitting a guard with his turtle guitar, like you mentioned. And he attempts to. So the Ned attempts to raise and surface the Nautilus himself. But in typical Nautilus fashion, it does hit a reef on the way up, because he was being wrestled by a crewman. And the ship is again taking out water. So then, he does go and he frees the professor and he frees the assistant in an attempt for them all to escape. But of course, the professor wants to go back for his journals, but they kind of prevent him, because it's about to blow up.
Yeah.
But they do get on an escape raft,
Mm-hmm.
the three of them. But just so none of you are worried, our sea lion friend also gets to escape with them on the on the raft. So there are no sea lions were injured in the making of this film.
Giant squid was though.
Sure. Right between the eyes. So Nemo, as the ship is going down and Nemo is kind of succumbing to his injuries, he opens the window to watch his greatest achievement as he passes away. And the bomb detonates and the entire Volcania Island blows up with all the findings going up in a very eerie scene. Beautiful but eerie scene. And then I don't want to talk over any of your notes or anything that you have here, but as the three men and the sea lion escape in the raft, we see the Nautilus finally sink from its damages, and we hear Nemo's final words, which were very loud and clear for him being inside of a ship that was going down. But it says, "There is hope for the future, and when the world is ready for a new and better life, all this will someday come to pass in God's good time." And they all sink to their death. Thoughts on the quote? It was a beautiful scene.
It was.
And then anything you'd like to add? Because next the book comes to close and it says the end.
It was just like a storybook ending.
Yeah. Anything I might have missed?
Nope, I think you hit it all.
All right. So before I go on, what I was going to say about this film,
Oh, hang on.
Go ahead.
What there was one thing that I thought was interesting after the squid.
Okay.
So they pull Nemo out of the squid's grip, and then he can't even walk. But then he can walk into the ship on his own. Like how all of a sudden, like you can't walk, and then all of a sudden you can walk.
I mean, endorphins are kicking.
I guess that was some goofs. I don't know.
His endorphins were kicking. So before I say what I'm going to say about the film, what did IMDb say about the film? And how
Do you
about
want to guess
yourself?
what the rating is?
I mean, knowing them, probably a 7.5, like they most of them are.
7.2.
7.2, the same as
I'm
last week.
10.
What about yourself?
I gave it a 7.
Okay. I loved this movie.
I'm glad you did. I loved the squid. I was pulling for the squid.
This movie was like a real like
I felt like it dragged on, in my opinion, but
I can see that,
you were
but
definitely interested in it.
it was like an adventure film done correctly. That we've watched some adventure films that I was like, oh, about earlier when we reviewed them. You talked about it.
much to like this movie,
I-
and I thought I would, but
I really enjoyed this movie. I was very happy we watched it. It was a good, fun adventure film. Um, it just held up more than some of the ones that we watched in the past.
held up, yes. But I don't know.
I just
It wasn't one of my favorites.
I don't think I ever watched it before. Clearly,
I never
we
watched it before.
clearly we have this VHS tape, so maybe. But tell me about this. Your List Upon a Star. Does this film, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, coming out in December of 1954, make your List Upon a Star?
No.
And what do we got for your list? What do we got for your list?
So I've got Dumbo, The Three Caballeros, Peter Pan, Alice in Wonderland, Fantasia, Saludos Amigos, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, Bambi, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and Cinderella.
So I was thinking that I think this is going to make mine, and I don't know if it's not going to make the exclusive top of the list, but I was very impressed with this film. So I think that I am going to slide it actually in right here. And my List Upon a Star is Peter Pan at number 1, Alice in Wonderland at number 2, Pinocchio at 3, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad at 4, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in the top 5, then The Three Caballeros, Cinderella, Dumbo, Bambi, and coming in at number 10, this movie that I really was thoroughly enjoyed while watching, and that is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Well, there you go.
So that was a good movie to round out our first 25.
It definitely was. It definitely was.
I was impressed. It was a fun adventure film. But we made it through 25. Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for making this possible for us to do. I know I always say the same thing at the end, but we would love to hear from you. We'd love to hear what of the 25 that we watched so far stuck out to you. What is your current favorite? Write it below, write it on the Spotify, write it in the email. We would love to know what your favorite is. And if 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, if you were a team sea lion or if you were a team squid. But next time, speaking of adventure films, and adventure films that I'm going to have an opinion on one way or the other, we have made it to 1955.
Yep.
And it's the 26th feature-length film, and it is a film called Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier.
Yep.
So we will leave our synopsises and our breakdowns of that for next time. But thank you for hanging out with us. Would you like to take us out?
Thanks for deep diving the magic.
Bye.
Bye.